The early morning sun filtered through the large windows of PowerFit Gym, casting long shadows across the polished floor. At 5:30 a.m., the place was relatively empty, just the way Nicole preferred it. As a 32-year-old lawyer who often worked 12-hour days, these morning workouts were her sanctuary, the only time she had to herself before the demands of the day took over. Nicole adjusted her headphones and increased the treadmill speed. Her breathing found its rhythm as her feet pounded against the moving belt. She was in her zone now, focused entirely on her form and breathing, oblivious to the few other early birds scattered around the gym. 20 minutes into her run, a man walked in. Tall with broad shoulders, he carried himself with the confidence of someone who considered the gym his territory. He scanned the room before his eyes landed on Nicole. For a moment, he just watched her, then made his way to the weights section directly across from her. Nicole didn't notice him at first. She was lost in her music, her mind wandering to the big case she was preparing for. It wasn't until she slowed down the treadmill to cool down that she felt his stare. When she glanced up, he quickly looked away, but there was something unsettling about his attention. Shaking off the feeling, Nicole grabbed her towel and water bottle and headed to the free weights area. She had a routine: cardio first, then weights, and finally stretching. She wasn't about to change it because some guy made her uncomfortable. As she selected a pair of dumbbells, she noticed him again. He was doing bicep curls but kept looking at her in the mirror. Nicole had experienced this kind of attention before. She'd been going to gyms since college and had developed a thick skin against the stares and occasional comments. Usually, she ignored them, and eventually, they'd move on. But this man seemed different. There was something hostile in his gaze, as if her mere presence offended him. Still, Nicole focused on her workout, determined not to let him ruin her morning. After completing her set, Nicole moved to another station. To her dismay, the man followed, choosing equipment right next to hers even though the gym was nearly empty. "Excuse me," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for his size. "You're using that machine wrong." Nicole removed one earbud. "I'm sorry." "That's not how you use that machine," he repeated, louder this time. "You're going to hurt yourself." Nicole had been using this particular machine for years. She knew exactly how to adjust it for her height and which muscles it targeted. "I appreciate your concern," she said politely, "but I know what I'm doing." She put her earbud back in, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. Instead, he reached over and touched her arm. "Look, I'm just trying to help. No need to get an attitude." Nicole pulled away from his touch, her heart rate increasing. "Please don't touch me," she said firmly. "I didn't ask for your help, and I don't need it." His face changed then, a flash of anger replacing the fake concern. "I've been coming to this gym for 5 years, and I've never seen you here before. You newbies come in thinking you know everything." "I'm not new," Nicole replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I've been a member here for 3 years. I just come early." "Right," he scoffed. "Well, maybe there's a reason the morning crowd is mostly men. Some areas of life are just better suited for guys, you know? Like serious fitness." And there it was, the real issue. Nicole had heard variations of this throughout her professional life. Too many times to count, men had tried to explain her own job to her or questioned her capabilities based solely on her gender or race. "I need to finish my workout," Nicole said, turning away from him. But he stepped in front of her. "I'm just saying, maybe the 9 a.m. yoga class would be more your speed. Leave the serious equipment for people who know how to use it." A few heads turned their way now. The gym staff was nowhere to be seen, probably in the back office at this early hour. "Move out of my way," Nicole said, her patience wearing thin. "Or what?" he challenged, towering over her. "You gonna make me? I'm just having a conversation here." Nicole took a deep breath. She'd dealt with difficult people throughout her career, opposing counsel who tried to intimidate her, clients who questioned her abilities, judges who talked down to her. She'd learned when to stand her ground and when walking away was the smarter option. Right now, her instincts told her this man wasn't going to back down easily. He wanted a reaction, wanted to prove some warped point about who belonged in his gym. "Sir, I don't want any trouble," she said calmly. "We both paid for memberships, and we both have a right to be here. Now please, let me continue my workout." He laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the large room. "There she goes with the sir thing. Always playing the victim card." Nicole felt a surge of anger. She wasn't playing any card, she was simply trying to exercise in peace. But she knew better than to escalate the situation. Without another word, she turned to walk toward the staff office to report him. That's when he grabbed her shoulder. "I'm not done talking to you." Nicole froze. This had gone beyond uncomfortable, it was now threatening. The few other gym-goers watched hesitantly, unsure if they should intervene. "Take your hand off me," Nicole said, her voice low but firm. "Right now." "Or what?" he repeated, his grip tightening. "What are you going to do about it?" What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was exactly who he was threatening. Nicole wasn't just any lawyer. She wasn't just any woman trying to get a workout in before heading to the office. And as his fingers dug into her shoulder, Nicole made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Little did he know that the woman he chose to harass that morning had a secret identity, one that would soon leave him speechless when it came to light. But first, Nicole had to decide how to handle the immediate threat in front of her, a decision that would set in motion a chain of events none of them could have anticipated. In one swift movement, Nicole reached up and firmly removed the man's hand from her shoulder. Her grip was surprisingly strong, her movements calm and deliberate. The gym fell completely silent. "I said," Nicole repeated, her voice even, "take your hand off me." The man's expression shifted from arrogance to confusion. He clearly hadn't expected such a confident response. He tried to pull his hand away, but Nicole held it firmly for just a moment longer before releasing it. "You don't get to put your hands on people," she said. "That's assault." The man scoffed, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes now. "Assault? Please. I barely touched you." "Unwanted physical contact constitutes assault under state law," Nicole replied, her tone changing subtly. Gone was the woman trying to avoid confrontation. In her place stood someone who knew exactly where she stood, legally and otherwise. A young gym employee finally appeared, drawn by the commotion. He looked barely out of high school and thoroughly uncomfortable with the tension crackling in the air. "Is everything okay over here?" he asked hesitantly. Before the man could speak, Nicole turned to the employee. "No, it's not. This gentleman has been harassing me and just put his hands on me without permission. I'd like to speak to the manager, please." The man's face reddened. "She's exaggerating. We were just talking, and she got all defensive." The employee looked between them, clearly out of his depth. The manager doesn't come in until 8, but I can." "That's fine," Nicole interrupted, reaching for her phone. "I'll just call the police instead." "The police?" The man laughed, but it sounded forced. "For what?" "For assault," Nicole repeated calmly, already dialing. "And I'll be requesting the security footage as evidence." The man's face changed as he glanced up at the cameras mounted in the corners of the gym. He hadn't noticed them before. "Look, lady, you're blowing this way out of proportion," he said, his voice lower now, less confident. "I was just trying to help." Nicole kept the phone to her ear. "Hello? Yes, I'd like to report an assault at PowerFit Gym on 5th Street. "Hang up the phone," the man hissed, stepping closer again. "You're making a big mistake. The few other gym members had stopped pretending to exercise and were openly watching now. One woman had moved closer to Nicole, a silent show of support. Nicole stepped back, maintaining distance between herself and the agitated man. "The mistake was yours when you decided to harass me and then put your hands on me." As she continued speaking with the dispatcher, the man's demeanor changed completely. The aggression melted away, replaced by growing concern. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, gathering his things. "I'm out of here." "Sir, I'd advise you not to leave," Nicole called after him, covering the phone's microphone with her hand. "Fleeing the scene won't look good." He hesitated at her authoritative tone, looking back at her with narrowed eyes. "Who the hell are you anyway?" Nicole finished her call and slipped her phone back into her pocket. "Someone who knows her rights," she answered simply. "And someone who's dealt with men like you before." The police would arrive soon, and the man was starting to realize he might have picked the wrong woman to intimidate. What he still didn't know was exactly how wrong, a fact that would become painfully clear to him very soon. Within minutes, 2 police officers walked through the gym's glass doors. One was a tall woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun, and the other a middle-aged man with a thick mustache. They surveyed the scene before approaching Nicole and the increasingly nervous man. "Ma'am, we received a call about an assault," the female officer asked, her hand resting casually on her belt. Nicole nodded. "Yes, officer. Thank you for coming so quickly." The male officer turned to the gym employee. "Do you have security footage of this area?" The young employee nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir. The whole gym is covered." "Good. We'll need to see that," the officer replied before turning back to Nicole and the man. "Now, what happened here?" Nicole explained the situation calmly, describing how the man had followed her, made inappropriate comments, and eventually grabbed her shoulder when she tried to walk away. She spoke with precision, sticking to the facts without embellishment. When it was his turn to speak, the man's story came out jumbled and defensive. "I was just trying to help her with the equipment," he insisted. "She overreacted completely. And I barely touched her, it wasn't a grab or anything like that." The female officer looked at Nicole. "Do you have any witnesses or evidence of the physical contact?" Before Nicole could answer, the woman who had stood nearby during the confrontation stepped forward. "I saw it," she said. "He definitely grabbed her shoulder when she tried to walk away. She asked him multiple times to leave her alone before that." The man's face flushed. "This is insane. It's her word against mine." "Actually," Nicole interjected calmly, "it's her word, the security footage, and my knowledge of the law against yours." Something about the way she said, "my knowledge of the law," made both officers look at her more closely. The male officer tilted his head. "Ma'am, are you an attorney?" A small smile touched Nicole's lips. "Yes, I am." The man who had harassed her let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you are. Playing the system." "It's not playing the system to know your rights," Nicole replied evenly. "Or to expect people to keep their hands to themselves." The female officer turned to the man. "Sir, we're going to need your information. And we'll be reviewing that security footage." As the officer took down his details, Nicole watched his demeanor change from defiance to worry. The reality of the situation was finally sinking in. This wasn't going to simply blow over. The gym manager had arrived during the commotion, a short, stocky man who introduced himself as Tom. He apologized profusely to Nicole and assured her they would be reviewing the incident thoroughly. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment," he insisted, shooting a pointed look at the man who was still speaking with the officers. "I'd like to see the footage myself." As they moved toward the office to review the security video, Nicole's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned slightly. "I need to take this," she told the officers. "It's important." Stepping aside, Nicole answered the call. The conversation was brief, but the officers noticed how her posture straightened and her voice took on an even more authoritative tone. When she returned, there was a subtle shift in how the police officers regarded her. The female officer leaned closer to her partner and whispered something that made his eyebrows rise. "Ms. Nicole," the female officer said carefully, "are you by any chance?" Nicole gave a small nod, cutting off the question. "Yes. But I'd prefer to handle this like any other citizen. The law applies equally to everyone, regardless of who they are." The man, still giving his statement nearby, looked between them with confusion. "What? Who is she?" Neither officer answered him directly, but their suddenly more formal demeanor spoke volumes. "Sir," the male officer said, turning back to him, "I think you're going to want to come with us to review this footage now." The small office at the back of the gym was cramped with 5 people squeezed inside. Tom the manager sat at the computer, queuing up the security footage while the 2 officers stood behind him. Nicole leaned against the wall, her arms crossed, watching the man who had harassed her shift uncomfortably from one foot to the other. "Here we go," Tom said, turning the monitor so everyone could see. "This starts about 10 minutes before the incident." The footage was clear and unmistakable. It showed Nicole on the treadmill, then moving to the weights area. The man could be seen watching her, following her from station to station, and finally grabbing her shoulder when she tried to walk away. The audio wasn't great, but his aggressive posture was obvious. As the video played, the man's face grew pale. Seeing his actions from an outside perspective seemed to strip away his justifications. That's not how I remember it," he muttered, but his protest sounded hollow even to his own ears. The female officer turned to him. "Sir, based on this footage and the witness statement, we have enough to charge you with simple assault." "Assault?" His voice cracked. "Over that? Come on. The law is clear," the male officer added. "Unwanted physical contact with intent to harass, intimidate, or harm constitutes assault. The video shows you followed this woman around the gym, continued to engage after she clearly wanted to be left alone, and then grabbed her when she attempted to walk away." The reality of his situation was finally sinking in. The man looked at Nicole, his expression a mix of anger and fear. "This is going to go on my record? Over this?" Nicole met his gaze steadily. "Actions have consequences." Tom cleared his throat. "I should also mention that your gym membership is terminated, effective immediately. As I said, we have zero tolerance for this behavior." "This is ridiculous," the man sputtered. "Do you know who I am? I'm a regional sales director at TechSphere. I can't have an assault charge." The name of the company caught Nicole's attention. "TechSphere? The software company?" "Yes," he replied, a hint of his earlier arrogance returning. "I'm pretty high up there." Something changed in Nicole's expression then, a subtle shift that the officers noticed immediately. "That's interesting," she said quietly. "Because TechSphere is currently being sued in a class action case for workplace discrimination." The man blinked. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Nothing directly," Nicole replied, straightening up from the wall. "Except that I know quite a bit about that case." The female officer suppressed a smile, seemingly putting pieces together that the man still couldn't see. "Look," the man said, his tone suddenly conciliatory, "I made a mistake, okay? I was having a bad morning, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. Can't we just forget this happened?" "Harassment and assault aren't mistakes," Nicole replied calmly. "They're choices." The male officer nodded. "Sir, we're going to need you to come down to the station to process the charge." As the officer began reading him his rights, the man's phone rang. He glanced at it and paled even further. "I need to take this," he said urgently. "It's my boss." The officers exchanged glances but allowed him to answer. Hello? Yes, sir. I'm at the gym, but, he stopped abruptly, his eyes widening as he listened to whatever was being said on the other end. Slowly, his gaze shifted to Nicole, really seeing her for the first time. She's here right now, he said weakly into the phone. Yes, sir. I understand. When he hung up, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. You're not just any lawyer, he said to Nicole, his voice barely above a whisper. You're. The office fell silent as everyone waited for the man to finish his sentence. His face had drained of all color, and he looked like he might be sick. You're Nicole Wilson, he finally managed, his voice barely audible. The lead attorney in the class action against TechSphere. The woman who's been taking depositions from our executives for the past month. Nicole gave a small nod, neither confirming nor denying his statement. But her silence was confirmation enough. The officers exchanged glances, now understanding why their presence had been requested so promptly when Nicole called. She wasn't just any lawyer, she was one of the most prominent civil rights attorneys in the state, known for taking on major corporations in discrimination cases and winning. Well, the female officer said, breaking the silence, this is certainly an interesting coincidence. The man shook his head in disbelief. This can't be happening. Of all the people in this city. It's a small world, Nicole replied evenly. Though I assure you, I didn't know who you were until you mentioned TechSphere just now. The man ran his hands through his hair, panic setting in. My boss just told me to come straight to the office. He said there's an emergency meeting of all regional directors. He looked at Nicole accusingly. Did you call them? I didn't, Nicole said truthfully. But news travels fast. Tom the manager cleared his throat uncomfortably. I might have mentioned something on the gym's social media about an incident this morning. No names, but... The man groaned. Great. Just great. The male officer stepped forward. Sir, regardless of who this woman is, you're still facing an assault charge. We need to continue with the process. Nicole held up a hand. Officer, if I may, I'd like a moment to speak with him privately. The officers looked surprised but nodded and stepped outside with Tom, leaving Nicole alone with the man who had harassed her less than an hour ago. Once the door closed, Nicole's professional demeanor remained firmly in place. I want to be clear about something. What happened this morning has nothing to do with the lawsuit against your company. The man scoffed. You expect me to believe that? This will destroy my career. Your actions this morning might affect your career, Nicole corrected him. Not mine, and not the lawsuit. The case against TechSphere is about systemic discrimination practices, not about one employee's behavior at a gym. Then why did you want to talk to me alone? He asked suspiciously. Nicole leaned against the desk. Because I want you to understand something. The way you treated me this morning, following me around, insisting I didn't belong, putting your hands on me when I tried to leave, that's exactly the kind of behavior that led to the lawsuit in the first place. The man shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't being racist or sexist. I was just... Just what? Nicole interrupted. Just assuming I didn't know what I was doing because I'm a woman? Just feeling entitled to touch me without permission? Just thinking the gym was more your space than mine? He had no answer for that. These small interactions happen to women, especially women of color, every single day, Nicole continued quietly. The only difference is that most don't have security cameras recording it or the legal knowledge to address it. The man stared at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. For perhaps the first time, he was seeing his actions through someone else's eyes. So what now? He asked finally. Are you going to make an example of me? Use this in your case somehow? Nicole straightened up and moved toward the door. No. As I said, this is separate from the lawsuit. She paused, her hand on the doorknob. But what happens next depends entirely on your choices from this moment forward. Nicole opened the door, and the officers stepped back into the small office. The man stood in the center of the room, looking lost in thought. Have you reached a decision? The female officer asked Nicole. Nicole glanced at the man before responding. I'm still pressing charges. What happened this morning was unacceptable, regardless of who either of us is. The man's shoulders slumped, but he didn't protest. The fight had gone out of him. I understand, he said quietly. And I'll take full responsibility. The male officer looked slightly surprised at his change in attitude but nodded approvingly. That's the right approach, sir. Let's head to the station now to process everything. As they prepared to leave, the man turned to Nicole. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just because of who you turned out to be, but, you were right about everything you said. Nicole studied his face, searching for sincerity. After a moment, she gave a small nod. Apology noted. The officers led the man out through the gym, which was now filling with the morning crowd. Curious eyes followed their departure, and whispers spread quickly. Tom the manager looked relieved that the situation was being handled but concerned about the publicity. Ms. Wilson, he said as Nicole gathered her things, I want to personally apologize that this happened at our facility. We pride ourselves on creating a safe environment for everyone. I appreciate that, Tom, Nicole replied. But policies only work when they're enforced consistently. How many smaller incidents go unreported because people don't feel empowered to speak up? Tom shifted uncomfortably. That's a fair point. We'll be reviewing our training procedures for all staff, especially for early morning shifts. As Nicole prepared to leave, her phone rang again. This time it was her law partner, Diane. I just heard what happened, Diane said when Nicole answered. Are you okay? News travels fast, Nicole commented, walking toward the locker room. I'm fine. Just an unpleasant start to the morning. Unpleasant? Nicole, he put his hands on you. And he works for TechSphere? This is unbelievable. It's being handled, Nicole assured her. I'm pressing charges, but keeping it separate from the case. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure that's wise? This could strengthen our position in the lawsuit. Nicole entered the locker room and lowered her voice. Diane, we've worked too hard to build this case on solid evidence of systemic discrimination. I won't muddy the waters by introducing my personal experience. That's not what our clients deserve. Always the bigger person, Diane sighed. Fine. But the partners want to meet this afternoon. This incident is going to get out, especially since it involves a TechSphere director. We need to prepare a statement. I'll be there, Nicole promised. Give me 2 hours to shower, change, and get my thoughts together. After hanging up, Nicole stood in front of her locker, the events of the morning washing over her. What had started as a routine workout had escalated into something that could potentially affect both her personal reputation and professional case. As she showered and changed into her business clothes, Nicole thought about the man's face when he realized who she was. That moment of recognition had shifted everything. Suddenly she wasn't just a woman he could harass without consequences. She was someone with power, someone who could impact his life. But that was precisely the problem, wasn't it? Respect shouldn't depend on who someone turns out to be. It should be the default, given freely to everyone regardless of their position or power. As Nicole left the gym, her phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made her stop in her tracks: TechSphere executive in police custody after gym altercation with lead attorney in discrimination case. Things were moving faster than she had anticipated. The private incident was now very public. Nicole stared at her phone, reading the full news article with growing concern. Someone had already leaked details to the press, details that were mostly accurate but framed in the most sensational way possible. The article even included a blurry photo of the man being escorted out of the gym by police. She tapped the phone icon next to Diane's name. "Have you seen the news?" Nicole asked the moment Diane answered. "I'm looking at it right now," Diane confirmed. "This changes things. The partners want you in the office immediately." "I'm on my way." The law firm of Patterson, Wilson and Chen occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek downtown building. By the time Nicole arrived, the reception area was buzzing with activity. Junior associates huddled around computers, monitoring news updates, while the firm's PR team was already drafting statements. Diane met Nicole at the elevator. "Everyone's in the main conference room." "How bad is it?" Nicole asked as they walked. "It's complicated," Diane replied. "On one hand, what happened to you reinforces everything we've been saying about TechSphere's culture. On the other hand, they might claim you're now too personally involved to lead the case objectively." When Nicole entered the conference room, all conversation stopped. 6 partners sat around the table, their expressions ranging from concern to calculation. Howard Patterson, the firm's founding partner, spoke first. "Nicole, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Howard. Thank you." "Good." He gestured to a chair. "This situation has created both problems and opportunities for our case." "I'd prefer to focus on the problems," Nicole said firmly, taking a seat. "This shouldn't change our approach to the lawsuit." Eliza Chen, the third named partner, leaned forward. "Nicole, TechSphere's lawyers have already called. They're suggesting that this morning's incident creates a conflict of interest for you personally." "That's absurd," Nicole replied. "I didn't know who he was when it happened." "But you know now," Howard pointed out. "And they'll argue that you can't remain objective." Nicole looked around the table. "Are you asking me to step down as lead counsel?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "You've built this case from the ground up," Diane said gently. "No one wants you to step down. But we need to consider what's best for our clients." Nicole took a deep breath. Everything she'd worked for over the past year, all the late nights, the hundreds of interviews with former employees, the meticulous documentation of TechSphere's discriminatory practices, and now her position was in jeopardy because one man couldn't handle being corrected by a woman at the gym. "Let me speak with our class representatives," Nicole said finally. "They should have a say in this decision." Howard nodded. "Fair enough. But we need to move quickly. TechSphere is already spinning this to their advantage." As if on cue, Nicole's phone buzzed with another news alert. TechSphere issues statement, gym incident, unfortunate personal disagreement, unrelated to ongoing litigation. Nicole felt her resolve strengthen. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been silenced, intimidated, or pushed aside, and the systems that protected those who did the pushing. "I'm not stepping down," she said, her voice steady. "And I'm not backing down either." The partners exchanged glances at Nicole's firm declaration. Howard looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Nicole's expression made him reconsider. "If you're certain," he said, "then we need a strategy to counter TechSphere's narrative. They're already downplaying the incident." "I have an idea," Nicole replied. "But first, I need to know exactly where things stand with the man from the gym. Has he been formally charged?" Diane checked her phone. "According to my contact at the police department, he's been processed and released. The assault charge is moving forward, but as a misdemeanor." Nicole nodded. "And has TechSphere made any statement about his employment status?" "Nothing specific," Eliza replied. "Their public statement only refers to him as an employee without naming him or his position." "That's interesting," Nicole said thoughtfully. "They're distancing themselves while still defending him. Classic damage control." Just then, Nicole's phone rang. She didn't recognize the number but answered anyway. "Ms. Wilson? This is James Reynolds." Nicole straightened in her chair. It was the man from the gym. "Mr. Reynolds," she acknowledged, putting the call on speaker so the partners could hear. "What can I do for you?" There was a pause before he spoke again. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since this morning. About what happened, about what you said, about everything." "Go on," Nicole prompted when he fell silent. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Not just about what I did to you, but about a lot of things. The way I've thought about women in the workplace, about who belongs where. I've been part of the problem." The partners exchanged surprised glances. "I appreciate your reflection," Nicole said carefully. "But I'm curious why you're calling me directly." Another pause. "Because TechSphere asked me to resign an hour ago. They're throwing me under the bus to save the company's reputation. And the thing is, I don't blame them." Nicole's mind was racing. "Mr. Reynolds, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I've been on the wrong side," he replied. "And I want to make it right. I've seen things at TechSphere, decisions made, people passed over for promotion, comments in executive meetings. Things that would help your case." The conference room was dead silent as the implications sank in. "Are you offering to testify against your former employer?" Nicole asked bluntly. "Yes," he said. "If you'll hear me out." Howard was already nodding vigorously, but Nicole held up a hand to silence him. "Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate your call, but I need to be very clear about something. If you're hoping this will make the assault charge go away, it won't. What happened this morning and what happens with the lawsuit are separate matters." "I understand that," he replied. "And I'm not asking for any deal. I'll face whatever consequences come from my actions at the gym. This is about doing what's right for all the people TechSphere has hurt over the years." Nicole looked around at her partners, who were watching her intently. This unexpected development could change everything, both for their case and for the broader message it would send. "In that case," Nicole said, "I think we should meet. How soon can you come to my office?" 3 weeks later, Nicole stood at the podium in the courthouse press room, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. The hallway was packed with journalists, former TechSphere employees, and curious onlookers. "This settlement represents a significant step forward not just for our clients, but for workplace equality across the tech industry," Nicole announced, her voice steady and clear. "TechSphere has agreed to a $40 million settlement fund for affected employees, plus comprehensive policy changes to address discrimination at all levels of the company." Behind her stood Diane, Howard, and the other partners. And somewhat surprisingly, to the side stood James Reynolds. "None of this would have been possible without the courage of our class representatives," Nicole continued, "and the testimony of former TechSphere executives who chose to do the right thing, even when it was difficult." She nodded subtly in Reynolds' direction. His testimony had been devastating to TechSphere's defense, detailed accounts of systemic discrimination, backed by internal documents and emails he had preserved. The company's lawyers had quickly shifted from fighting to damage control. After the press conference, Nicole found Reynolds waiting in a quiet corner of the hallway. "Congratulations," he said. "You've changed a lot of lives today." "We all did," Nicole replied. "Your testimony was crucial." Reynolds nodded, looking both proud and humbled. "My sentencing hearing is tomorrow. My lawyer says with the community service I've already started and the character letters, I might avoid jail time." "That seems fair," Nicole said. "You've shown genuine remorse and made real amends." In the weeks since the gym incident, Reynolds had not only cooperated with the lawsuit but had also begun working with a local nonprofit that helped women of color enter the tech industry. He'd paid his fine for the assault charge without complaint and had publicly apologized for his behavior. "I never asked," Reynolds said hesitantly. Would you have one without my testimony? Nicole considered this. Eventually, yes. But it might have taken years longer, with many more people suffering in the meantime. He nodded, accepting this. I keep thinking about what you said that morning, about how my behavior at the gym reflected the same attitudes that created problems at TechSphere. You were right. I just couldn't see it until I was forced to. Sometimes that's what it takes, Nicole said. A moment that makes us step back and really see ourselves. As they parted ways, Nicole thought about how a simple morning at the gym had cascaded into something that affected hundreds of lives. One confrontation had exposed not just an individual's bias but an entire company's culture of discrimination. Outside the courthouse, Diane caught up with her. Ready for the next case? We've already got calls from employees at 3 other tech companies. Nicole smiled. Absolutely. This was never just about one company or one incident. It's about changing the system. As they walked down the courthouse steps together, Nicole felt a sense of accomplishment, not just as an attorney who had won a landmark case, but as someone who had stood her ground that morning at the gym. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest stands. In the end, her secret identity hadn't been about having power or status, it had been about having the courage to use them both for something larger than herself.